So, the Eagles beat the Browns. Big whoop. Said before, I didn't think that the Browns were on the same caliber as the Eagles this year. And, I mean, they won, but they didn't win convincingly. And the Eagles honestly didn't look that great. So, I think it's time for me to say that the Eagles are a bad team with a lot of good players. So, what does that kind of mean, right? That means that there's a lot of people that have a lot of talent, but they're just not meshing well together. You have a lot of offensive players that are great, and a lot of defensive players that kind of on their own are really decent. But as a unit, which it has to be a team. There's no way for one person to win. So as a team, they're just not doing that well, and I just don't think they're that good this year. I think that if we make the playoffs, we'll be out of it in the first round like last year. And the way I do this, I really say that you take the first like 5 or 6 weeks as an aggregate of how a team is probably going to perform for the year, right? First game or two off of the new season, if your starters didn't get any preseason snaps, it's going to be rust you got to knock off. So you wave off the first 1, 2, maybe even 3 games, depending on injuries and other stuff, right? But once you have that sample size of the first couple of games, the first 6 games, you start to look at your opponents and who has beaten them or who have they beaten to kind of get an idea of where you fall into the lot of the teams, right? So you got the Browns. They played the Cowgirls first, and they lost 33-17, right? And they played the Jaguars, and they won against the Jaguars. But we've looked at the Jaguars. The Jaguars look horrible. They only have one win. I can't remember if they. I don't know if they won today or not in London. Let me look real quick. See if they won today. No, they lost. So they have one win for the season, right? So then they lose against the Giants, which we absolutely think the Giants aren't that great. And the Giants beat them by 6. They lose to the Raiders. The Raiders beat them with the same score we did, 2016. So the Raiders, they're not that good. They have a bad record. The Commanders, who I think are playing excellent this year, even against that game against the Ravens today, they won by 34-13. So you see, the Cowboys and the Commanders both put up 30 on them, at least 30, and kept them to 17 against the Cowboys and 13 in the Commanders. And then our game. So where does that put us? That puts us not as bad as the Browns or the Jaguars, but not as good as the Commanders or even the Cowgirls. Even they looked better. It's like, what are we doing? I am kind of at a loss for words because I expected us to hold them to less points. And honestly, if you think about it, though, the blocked field goal did give them a touchdown, did give them 7 of their 16, so they really should have 9. But I don't like to play the game of woulda, coulda, shouldas because realistically, we could play that at any time for the good or the bad. Saquon catches against the Falcons, we win, that type of deal. But he didn't. So they have 16. And we only had 20. We couldn't get the offense going for Jack. Jalen's throwing. Now, I'll bounce back and forth. Jalen's throwing behind folks. Jalen is not getting the ball where it needs to be at some points, and then others he's throwing absolute dots. And this is what I've been saying for the last couple of weeks. It kind of pisses me off is that you see that he could do it, right? Something that told him, or I told him, he's not listening to me, but something I said before is if he can throw in stride, we will win, right? So what happens when he's hitting AJ in stride? AJ catches the ball. He makes the play. What happens when he's throwing Smitty in stride? Smitty's making plays. You can't be throwing behind the person and expect them to make up some yards unless the defender is just going to whiff them and then they can get it. If the defender's right on them, it's really hard for them to shake. But if he can hit people in stride, if he can make snappy decisions like we saw him do sometimes during this game, he can really lead some monstrous drives. We've seen him pick up on the blitz, which I was actually really happy about. He picked up on the blitz. We saw him recover that bad snap and automatically get rid of it. Those are top tier plays that I am very happy to see him doing, right? But he has to be consistent. 3 and outs, the way we were getting 3 and outs against the Browns, that shouldn't have been. That score should have been like 40-16, right? We were not able to capitalize at all on the progress that we were making, and that's what kind of bothers me. We'll see what happens next week against the Giants, which I believe is another not as good team. And if it's more of the same, it's just more of the same, right? It's just going to be our year to make it and then be booted. I don't know. We'll see. I'm not excited, though. I'm just level. We won. See you next week. I think the real test for us to show if we can compete is, let's see, it's in a couple of weeks if I'm not mistaken. I think we play, okay, so we got the Giants next week. Not concerned about that. So the Bengals is going to be one where I want to the Bengals is going to be one where I am excited to see how we play and how we do. Hopefully we'll do well against them. The Jaguars, I expect it to be like the Browns. I expect us to win. There's no reason why we shouldn't win against the Jags. The Cowgirls, honestly, I think there's no reason why we shouldn't win against them either. And then the Commanders. So Bengals, Commanders are going to be our real benchmarks, our real level setting of are we going to be able to compete in the playoffs? If we can't perform well against the Bengals and the Commanders, our playoff hopes, and just in my opinion, are out the window. I mean, let me know what y'all think. But right now, grateful for the win. I'll take it. But it doesn't really move the needle for me on the team. Fly, Eagles, fly. Regardless. Win, lose, or draw. Fly, Eagles, fly.